So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am, my skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course the tinfoil hat guy's going to see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it's used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking.
See how it rolls and stuff. And since we're doing a pre-record, we can always edit stuff. So,
right.
Which, of course, with me doing it is so scary, but that's okay. So I will just go. So anyway, and I just realized I wasn't recording. Oh my God.
Well,
okay,
we can start over.
Okay. So anyway, okay. Well, happy Friday night, my friends. We have just been warming up. And so, as you know, when Erica is doing the production work, strange things happen, like the fact that we just had a really great conversation, assuming that I had actually started the mic. And, well, no, that didn't really happen. So anyway, let me tell you about my friend and somebody who is honestly just so amazing behind the scenes and he always makes me smile. And so Carlo has been around for a long, long time, 25 years in the field. He started taking pictures when he was 7 years old and is a very accomplished photographer who has traveled all over the world. And we'll talk a little bit about some of his exotic vacations and things like that. But thank you for being here. And thank you for doing the intro again.
It's my pleasure, Erica.
Oh, Lordy. So, okay, I want to ask you why you got interested in the UFO topic.
Well, that's a great question. And the answer is I grew up as a child of the 60s. And what was happening in the 1960s? There was the huge push for the space program. Also, there was a huge flap of UFO sightings. Add on to that the beginning of the science fiction kind of programming on television, like Lost in Space and Star Trek, The Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, and all of that just kind of came together for me. I was a huge fan of the space program. I remember listening in my second grade classroom to John Glenn's flight when he went around the Earth for the first time. And I followed the space program all the way to the end of the Apollo program. And still, now I live about 2 hours away from Kennedy Space Center, so I've been over there several times. So I have a fascination with space, with science, and with the science fiction that I grew up with, and the UFO reports that were in the newspaper, that were on television. Look magazine, Life magazine, Saturday Evening Post, all did feature stories about UFOs. And back then, the stories weren't about ridicule. They were about, this is what somebody reported. They say they saw something. We don't know what it was. But here are the facts of what they told us. So obviously that's changed with media today being more inclined to make fun of people who report UFOs. But back then it was taken as serious news.
And isn't that, it's fascinating because as I look through, Ann Dreffel's archives and some of the other things that I'm lucky enough to have in my possession, she has a lot of, old articles, from different magazines and even the National Enquirer, who actually did some pretty interesting stuff with regard to UFO research back in the day. But it was really, it was more respected back then if somebody saw something. And I've never thought about that before, but you're absolutely correct.
And I think it had to do with the fact that we were starting to reach out as a species to go into space. So people, when they saw something strange in the sky, kind of combined the two and said, if we're doing that, maybe somebody else out in some other world is coming to see us, like we're trying to get into space now. So I think maybe that was why it was a little bit more seriously taken.
And I think, too, you have, organizations, I mean, like NICAP, and even though there's some interesting things coming out about NICAP, but you had, that group, and they were, I think, much more respected than some of the people like that, you see now that just don't seem to take it seriously, and will show up to an investigation in a, I mean, they're grubbies and not, you know what I'm saying. I think it's just, things have changed so much in that regard. But what, when you, I mean, so, UFOs, I mean, you've got the space program and all of these cool accomplishments that we made as a country, and then you've got this science fiction aspect. Was there ever any, did you have a personal experience?
Well, let me put it this way. I spent a lot of my childhood looking up at the sky. I was also interested in astronomy. And my friend Mike from grade school and I would spend summer nights looking up in the sky, and we thought we saw lights moving and stuff like that. But, it's more wishful thinking, I think, than actual experiencing. Several years later, I met Mike at a wedding, and he told me he had been up camping somewhere in northern Michigan. And one night he said he saw this huge, bright light just rise up behind the lake and then take off into the sky. And he said, we saw things back then. I really saw something.
Wow. That must have been exciting and I mean, just cool. I mean, and you and your friend, Mike, I mean, you've had, a really wonderful friendship with him, and he passed away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a different Mike.
Oh, sorry.
Mike.
Okay.
I was just, no, that's okay. The one I refer to as a childhood friend, and
okay.
The Mike that I have done great exploring with was a companion that I met, a colleague at work. So different people.
Okay. But at least, I mean, the same names and things, and you've had adventures with both of them, I can tell you. And so,
right.
So when did you first get involved, and how did you get involved in like the UFO circuit?
Well, I had been, like I said, very interested in UFOs as a child and as a teenager. But then, life happens, and I got a job, I started a career. And it just so happened that career was in the movie theater industry. I had long been interested in movies and thought about making movies and writing scripts and things like that. But I ended up in the movie theater industry, showing movies at a theater. One year, and I should add, I lived at that time in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which has every summer the world's largest aviation show. At the airport in Oshkosh, it becomes the busiest airport that week in the world, bar none. There are thousands and thousands of planes, private planes that come to this event. So one year, I get a call from my home office saying, there's a guy who wants to rent the theater that you manage to show a movie during EAA. It's a movie about the SR-71 Blackbird. And the SR-71 Blackbird was going to be on display at the air show that year. So he saw an opportunity to rent the theater, show this film that I think he produced, and try to take advantage of the fact that the SR-71 Blackbird was at EAA in Oshkosh that year. So when EAA rolls around, a guy comes to my theater, introduces himself, and it's Bob Brown, who was the co-founder of the International UFO Congress along with Wendell Stevens. And Bob and I hit it off, and we became friendly. And during the day, Bob was at the air show trying to sell aviation videos because his business at that time was going from air show to air show to air show across the country, shooting video and then taking it back to his home base in Oakland, California, editing it and making aviation videos that he sold through aviation magazines and at air shows.
Wow,
so
that's cool.
Yeah. So we became friends over the course of the week that he was there. And the next year, he comes back to Oshkosh to sell more aviation videos, and he comes back to my theater, and we start talking. And he tells me, I'm going to have a UFO conference coming up in Las Vegas in November. And he starts telling me all about this conference he's putting on. And he said, we use volunteers. So if you're interested in coming and you are interested in volunteering, I'd be happy to have you. So I thought about it, and I said, yeah, I'd like to help you, Bob. And he said, how'd you like to volunteer? And I said, well, I'd like to help out with your AV because, I, as you said, I've been photographing things since I was 7 years old. I was making my own home movies. I was taking cinema courses in college, and thought it would be fun to help out with the AV side. So I ended up going to this conference, and believe it or not, we're shooting with 2 camcorders with videotape in them. There's no microphones or anything connected. We're just pointing the camera at the screen or at the presenter, and then if there's a slide or something, at the screen behind the presenter. And then the guy who worked for Bob would take those videotapes back to Oakland and edit to them so that they could be sold at the UFO Congress's catalog by mail order. And that's how it all began.
Well, and that is so cool. I mean, because you were really there from the ground up to watch this, turn into something huge. And what were
right.
how many people were there at the first conference?
It was very well attended. This was actually, I think, the 3rd International UFO Congress. The first one was in Tucson, and then there was a second one in Las Vegas at the Riviera, and the third one was in Las Vegas at a hotel called the Castaway.
Oh.
And then the next, yeah. And the next,
That's interesting.
Then the next year, the conference moved to Mesquite, Nevada for it was probably 3 years before moving to Laughlin, where it stayed for the next 17 years.
And so, what was your favorite place to have it?
I think my favorite place to have it was in Laughlin, and at the Gold River Hotel, because that was right on the Colorado River, and the meeting room exited right out onto a sidewalk that overlooked the river. So whenever there was a break between speakers, we could go out and stand on the sidewalk and watch the mountains and look at the river flowing and the boats and everything going. And that's where I had my most interesting sighting ever. And I will preface by saying, I don't know what I saw. I'm not going to pretend to give you an explanation for what I saw. I'll just tell you what I saw. And that was the last night of the conference. It was a Saturday night. There had been a big banquet. And we had just finished the meal, and before the program began, went out onto this terrace that overlooked the Colorado River. And I and several friends are out looking. It's a little after dusk, and looking to the east over the river. And I noticed some lights, just white lights that are moving in unison. And they're just kind of slowly drifting across the sky. And then they kind of break formation and start doing things like circling around each other. And we sat and we watched these lights for maybe 10 minutes before they finally disappeared. Now, earlier that same day, there had been a Japanese film crew there, and they had shot some footage of something that was a lead-colored object in the sky that nobody could figure out what it was. But this was much more spectacular in the evening to see the lights actually move. It reminded me of some of the stuff that Ruben Uriarte had shown at the conferences a few years earlier. But that was the most interesting thing I've ever seen in the sky that I can't identify.
And how fitting that it was at the end of the conference.
Yes.
How interesting. And so I have to because I think the history of all of this is so cool and fascinating. But when you were working audio video at the third conference, who were the speakers?
That was a long time ago, but
okay.
I do remember some of them. I know Michael Lindemann was there. I believe Danny Sheehan, and a guy by the name of Eddie Page. Eddie Page had a fantastic story. He claimed to be a hybrid. His mother, he said, was impregnated by an extraterrestrial. And he went to Vietnam and was given the secret mission to kill the president of North Vietnam. And he is on this mission and is mortally wounded. He is in a rice paddy trying to retreat to save his life. And he's almost dead. And his father from space comes down and saves him. And then years later, he's in some hospital, and people are trying to figure out, what is this guy? His organs are all arranged differently than human organs are. It's kind of a very odd story. So the next year, Eddie Page comes back, and he does a presentation. And I think this is indicative of a lot of what happens in the UFO field. He came back and had an even more fantastic story about visitations from his father and how some guy by the name of Colonel Gray was tracking him, and he'd go back to his room and his belongings had been gone through, and people questioning him. But every time he talked, his story became more elaborate and more impossible to believe. It's like he craved the attention that he was getting, and he wanted to get more attention. And eventually he ended up taking a woman that he met at the conference back to Florida and basically abandoning her there.
Ah. Wow. And
yeah.
I mean, what was the crowd's reaction to what he was saying?
Well, the crowd's reaction for most of these kind of presentations is awe. They can't. It's not that they can't believe it, but they are so mesmerized by what speakers say. I don't think there's a lot of. I don't think there's a lot of processing of what the information given at some of these conferences is by the attendees. They come. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, isn't that kind of. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, let me start by saying, what is the one question that most people ask you about UFOs?
Are they real?
That, but the bigger question is, do you believe in UFOs?
Yeah.
And I think that's the wrong question to ask. because belief implies that you believe in it. There doesn't have to be any evidence necessarily. It becomes a belief system. And all of the things that you see and hear at these conferences become part of that belief system without really any hard forensic evidence to prove it, most of it. So the question I think that people should ask rather than do you believe in UFOs is, what is the scientific empirical evidence that UFOs exist, that they're real? And I think that's the kind of question that UFO researchers need to be asking, looking for the real empirical evidence. I
absolutely agree with you, and I know everybody listening agrees with you as well. And it is interesting because when I first got into this, I definitely believed in a lot of things that were being put out there, and so I just have to say that the call just dropped, but we're back. And so, some of the things that people say, I did believe, in these things. And as I've matured over time and gotten a broader perspective of people and stories and things, that what I know now and what I know, and that's exactly right, no, is much different than, 10 years ago. And,
right.
And so does it ever, when you hear people, telling these tall tales and things, what are your thoughts? Because I know I'm a little bit more passionate about, these things but everybody has a different way of, of dealing with this. And so, what is the most preposterous thing that you've heard, and how did that make you feel?
Well, over the course of the years, I have heard incredibly preposterous stuff. Everything from tall whites living in the desert outside of Las Vegas, and occasionally taking forays into the city to gamble, and jump rooms to Mars, and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. But
well,
I'm sure you remember what the poster on Fox Mulder's wall was.
Mm-hmm. I want to believe. Yep.
So I think many of the people who attend these events come with a predisposition that they want to believe. I've heard speakers talking about reptilian bases on the far side of the moon, and mass abductions, and going way back, biblical giants, and even things like Jacques Vallée talking about fairies and folklore as perhaps being things that were seen as UFOs, but then described in terms that people of the time knew. So it's very fascinating to me that people can come to these conferences, they can hear all of this information, and not a lot of questioning of it. Where is the evidence? I see a lot of video, I see a lot of photographs that people say, oh, look, there's a UFO. And I as somebody who's looked through a camera lens for, a long time, I see that, okay, that's a lens flare. That's a bird that's a little bit blurry because the shutter speed wasn't fast enough. That's a reflection. So there are lots of good explanations for a lot of the things that people think look like UFOs. Let me give you a perfect example. I posted a picture on Facebook just a few days ago of a light I saw in the sky. I'm sitting where I am right now in my backyard, and I just happened to notice a light that was kind of low, but it looked like it was coming straight toward me, and it was getting increasingly more brilliant. And then all of a sudden it started to get dim. And then I realized what I was looking at was an airplane that was headed toward me, or actually headed out west toward the Gulf of Mexico, and I was seeing its front landing lights. And when it turned, the landing lights went away, and they actually formed like a beam in a thin cloud. So the picture I posted shows this object with looks like a beam shooting out of the front of it or out of the back. Some people thought, hey, that looks like a rocket. But, if you just post that picture, people will say, oh, look, that's a UFO or something like a rocket. But they're not there to see what happened after that. After, the plane flew through the cloud, I could see the navigation lights blinking, and I saw that it was on its approach to Tampa International. And I've seen that site, hundreds of times at night here. Let me give you another example. I want to believe. Way back a long time ago, when we did the conferences in Mesquite, the conference would organize a tour to Area 51 to go to the Black Mailbox. And it would take 2 or 3 hours to get out there, and we'd make a stop at the Little Alien and have lunch, and then go, when it started to get dark, to the Black Mailbox and start watching the skies for stuff. And I'm looking at all of these people pointing at stuff in the sky. And somebody said, look, that light, it's changing color, it's moving. And I'm looking up in the sky and I say, what do you see? I recognize the stars that are up there, that looks like Sirius or it could be Jupiter or something. I recognize things that are in the sky because I spend a lot of time looking at it. But they so want to believe and are in the context of Area 51, so they think they have to see something there.
And it's like this group hypnosis.
Yeah. And one person sees it, and then everybody else starts to see it. And I was there with Glenn Campbell, who at that time was running the Area 51 Research Center, I think. And he had his telescope set up, and he was kind of looking at these people too, saying, stars, they're stars. And then to top it off, the person who was running the tour took out a spotlight, and she was just pointing out some of the things in the area. And all of a sudden, somebody shouted, "Oh, look, there's an orb." What had happened is she had moved the spotlight so it hit the back of a stop sign where there's a little bit of reflectivity.
Oh, dear.
But people are so inclined to believe, especially when they're at the site where they expect something to happen.
And that is so true. And I've found the same thing, with Skinwalker Ranch and the surrounding areas. Like, so many times I'll see people posting things that live in the area on, Facebook and things, and, oh, look at this. And it's like, okay, that might be a chemtrail. It might be A, B, C, and D. And it's like, you just get so, granted, I know I made mistakes in misidentifying things. That's a learning process that you go through, and
right.
and things, and hopefully people have enough sense to say, okay, yeah, I made a mistake, or I'm leaving this open to, finding more things out, and things, and people, as with their belief systems, it's like most of these people just want to live and kind of die on that cross.
Right. And then they typically don't accept a different answer if there is one. You can give them evidence that it's something else, but they, in many cases, don't choose to believe it.
And again, that has been evidenced by, like even, like the Bob Lazar thing or different stories like that. I mean, MJ-12, I mean, things that have things and people that have been, debunked, with a lot a lot of thought behind it, a lot of research to back it up. And yet, people are just, they would defend these things till their dying breath. And it's like, why do you feel people are so adamant about that?
Right. I think part of it is that there are no real UFO researchers. There are a lot of amateurs who are interested in the topic and choose to conduct their own research, but they haven't been trained in how to be forensic, to search for forensic evidence and how to use the scientific method. They may be, a PhD, but not in astrophysics or aeronautics or any of that stuff. You mentioned MJ-12, and I love Stanton Friedman. He was a great guy, but he was a nuclear physicist, not somebody who, had a great deal of expertise in some of the other things that are important in the UFO field.
Right. Absolutely. And he's a prime example of somebody that, even though there was a lot of evidence presented, with MJ-12, he just wasn't going to shift away from his belief on that.
But it was interesting to see him and Bob Lazar debating at one of the conferences one year.
You're with Jeremy Corbell?
Yes, right, Jordan Knapp.
Mm-hmm. That was one for the memory books. I think I sat in the back just going, "Oh, is this really happening?" And I mean, Stan much to his credit, just kind of let it roll off his back, and it was just an interesting thing to see. And people can find it on YouTube, I think, somewhere. But it is, very, very interesting to see that. And what are your thoughts on the Lazar thing?
Well, I'm not sure what to think. I think, again, it's one of these things where it starts kind of with a credible story, but then becomes more. And then the more information, the more detailed, the less believable it becomes to me. There's always an explanation. Why is there no record of him? Why are these documents changed and crazy stuff like that? So I don't know. I have no clue as to what's going on at Area 51 and any inside information on that.
Well, I'm pretty sure that nobody does. Is talking about Area 51 publicly, because most people have to sign their life away that really know what's going on. But it is interesting. And so, what when you have you seen have things changed at all since you first got into this, in as far as like the tone or the things that people were talking about the most?
It depends on the conferences. The earlier MUFON symposiums dealt more with kind of nuts and bolts, and some of the international UFO conferences in the early years delved more into spirituality, and it's just become a mix of so many different things now. But I think what I am seeing is more fantastic stories recently that, like I mentioned, jump rooms to Mars, and some guy who claims to have been to Mars with Barack Obama, and that in the future he's going to be president of the United States, and crazy stuff like that.
Wow.
That's, yeah.
Do you ever get the vibe I mean, because I think there are people that are, delusional, and honestly believe the stuff that they're promoting. And then there are those people that have an agenda. And I mean, how would you say, what is the ratio there? What's the mix?
Honestly, I can't tell you. I know there are a lot of people who are just in it because they get some kind of fame. They're not going to make a lot of money as lecturers at UFO conferences. They may make a little bit, writing and publishing a book, but if you go to some of these conferences, the adulation that some of these speakers get is just amazing. It's like some of them actually have groupies
yeah.
who follow them around. But then there are a lot of sincere people as well, who are doing what they consider to be good research, and they don't have huge egos, and they're a joy to work with because they don't make demands about what kind of microphone they want to have, or what kind of lights they need to have on the stage. And
ooh, you're giving me ideas for my next conference. Lighting, you better make me look good.
Well, most of the time it's can you turn those lights off? I can't see the audience. And, I say, yeah, we can turn it off, but then nobody will be able to watch your videos.
Good point.
But I love working with those very sincere people who take the subject seriously, who are not just there to get people excited and to, have some level of, I don't know, feedback that's very positive and, like I said, adulation and fame of some kinds.
And it is interesting to see. And I would definitely encourage my listeners, if you have a chance to go to a conference, because you just sit back sometimes and go, whoa, this is trippy. Because you do watch, it's like you've got the guy sitting over here at the table who probably never had a date in high school, who's now got throngs of girls, all over. And just the different personalities. And it's like, oh, who is paying for my therapist? I don't know.
Yeah, there was one guy who was in the vendor room at conferences for years, and he wrote a book called Heaven is Up, which he literally meant up. Heaven is up. It's in the sky somewhere. And he wrote an entire book about it.
Okay. Was it a picture book?
There were some pictures in it, and it was not very cohesively written.
It's probably self-published, I'm sure.
But I'm sure it was, typos and grammatical errors and things like that. But that's par for the course when you read a lot of self-published stuff.
Well, honestly, that would be kind of fun to have in my collection.
Yeah.
Definitely a good coffee table book.
I have another book that was self-published called The History of the International UFO Congress. It was written by a woman who worked the desk at the conference since its inception in Tucson and came every year until the conference was sold to Open Minds. And it's a very interesting read. I don't know if anybody can ever find it, but it's
cool.
It's by Patricia or Pat Weisleader.
And what are some of the things that she talks about? Because again, the history of these conferences I find fascinating.
Well, hers was more of a personal history about the people that she met, She was outside, sitting at the registration table, so didn't see a lot of the presentation, but she interacted with a lot of the people who attended the conferences, and that's kind of what she wrote about.
And I think that's almost the best part, is to sit, out at the vendor tables and just see the comings and goings, and it's always, it's always fascinating. And I have to ask you, because, some things that have kind of struck me at different conferences is there have been speakers, and they're kind of few and far between, that really have things of merit and that are presenting evidence. I mean, fact-based evidence that is, they're using the scientific method, and it's not quite as sexy or as glamorous.
Right.
But then, you've got maybe 24 people listening to that lecture, and then you've got a lecture on, say, Rendlesham Forest, and it is, lines out the door to see that lecture, even though it's probably the same lecture that people have seen 100 times. But
right.
Why is it just because it's just more sexy to talk about Rendlesham or something?
Yeah, I think, it's Rendlesham is more or less a high-profile case that people have heard of, and they might come to see a particular speaker, like a Stan Friedman or Linda Moulton Howe or Jaime Maussan. And one of my favorite people, Travis Walton. And you talked about the people who were there just for to be there to get recognition. I think Travis is the opposite of that. He's there because he's very sincere, and he has a good story to tell. And what I love about Travis is that from the first time I saw him 20 years ago to today, he tells the exact same story. He doesn't add more information. He hasn't had more contacts. More fantastic things haven't happened to him. And his attitude is, here's my story. Believe it if you want, but this is what happened to me. And that is very admirable in my mind, that he is so principled that he sticks to his story. He doesn't make it sexier to attract more information or so he can get a new book deal. And I'd highly recommend the film that was released a few years ago. That was a documentary about him.
Travis?
Yes.
Isn't that the name of the documentary?
Yes.
Yeah, that's...
Jennifer Stein was one of the producers on that.
And you're absolutely right. When I've been at different conferences with him, I mean, he goes off by himself and is a very quiet man and very unassuming, and he's just, the last conference I was at with him, it was the Utah UFO Festival, and I just remember having just candid conversations, and this hasn't been an easy thing for him. I mean, his life has been, he's had a lot of difficult things to move through, and he just plugs away, and I think that does show a level of sincerity about him. Right.
And he wasn't very happy with the results of the movie that was based on his book, Fire in the Sky, because it did make it sexier by depicting what happened to him supposedly on the craft that he was abducted into. And he didn't like that because it really didn't show what happened to him. It was more sensationalized. So keep that in mind when you see that movie. That Travis didn't think that was a good, accurate depiction of what happened to him.
Well, and I mean, in the movie, they're showing Travis, and I'm sure he was frightened. I mean, how could you not be? But I think that one of the discrepancies that he had, from my understanding, is the fact that whatever it was, these beings in the movie are portrayed as villainous, horrible, creatures, and yet that wasn't the experience that he talks about, that he was hit with this beam of light and that they saved him.
Right.
And so it is interesting.
And now you say he's quiet and so assuming, but he also has an other side. Did you know that he has a band? That he's an excellent guitar player?
Yes. In fact, I remember, being at some of these conferences, and he gets out his guitar and, just to the big jam fest, which is just a ton of fun. I love doing that. That's really cool.
At one of the Starworks conferences produced by Paula Harris, he brought his family, and they performed as the Walton family band.
That was so cute. I was there.
Yes.
That was really, really cute. In fact, I was hoping that I could get up and perform, but that didn't happen. But the next time I'm at a conference with Travis, I'm just going to say, okay, this is it. You and I are going to do a little duet and bring it on. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, that would be fun to see.
Well, I'll have to put that bug in his ear. It is cool, and it is fun to see people at these conferences just like relaxing and enjoying each other. And there's a really great fellow. I'm sure you've worked with Danny. Just a colorful guy. And he does audio video. But I remember one year we sat around the fire and we were singing, and he was playing his guitar, and he wrote a song about me, and I thought that is so cute. I've not had another man write a song about me, and I think I still have it recorded. It was actually a really pretty song, so that was fun. Yeah,
Danny's a great guy, a great friend of mine as well, and he is, when he's not touring, as he hasn't been because of COVID, he's doing crazy things in the studio, creating his own art.
He's
a wonderful musician.
Colorful. Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Just a brilliant talent. He's one of those guys that you just see it and say, hey, I love it. And it's fond memories of him. And so, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, at this point, I don't go to conferences anymore to hear information. I go to see the people that I've met over the years and to enjoy and catch up with them, and then hear an occasional presentation. Now, people think because I go to the conferences and I'm there for every presentation pretty much, that I hear everything. They don't realize what goes on behind the stage. I'm sitting back there trying to figure out how to solve a problem that might come up with our recording, or trying to listen to what PowerPoint slide is the speaker talking about. I want to make sure it's on the screen in the auditorium where everybody can see it. And when do I have to roll that next video clip? And how does the sound to the people sitting out there? How is it sounding on the recording that we're making? So there's lots going on behind the stage. Plus, we're getting ready for the next speaker sometimes, and dealing with what we have to do to strike this set to get something different on the stage, so that when somebody wants to not be at the podium, they'd rather be seated. We have to figure out, where we're going to get a comfortable chair for that person, and how we're going to get it up there. How much time do we have between when the current speaker goes up and the next one gets on? It's just craziness. So a lot of times I hear only bits and pieces of what people are saying, and a lot of times I can't even tell you what somebody talked about until I go back and I might rewatch the videos that we make of it.
It is a very intense job, and I've seen what goes on behind the scenes, and you guys are working your tails off, and it's there's a reason why the production looks so good, and that's because of you.
Well, thank you.
No, it's remarkable. I love it, and I hope I get to work at a conference with you sometime soon. That would be fun. I think I'm on the naughty list, though.
Well, let's talk about that. I think you have made some people a little uncomfortable in this field. by calling them out.
Yes, indeed.
and deservedly so, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, there's some people who are great people that I've worked with, and then there are people who are not good people at all, but somehow have gravitated to positions of authority in this field when they really have no expertise and shouldn't be where they are.
I couldn't agree with you more. And for me, when I first, got into this publicly, I was just really trying to make everybody happy and just do what I could to support people and, all of these things. And that's just how I am by nature. It's like I will give people second and third and fourth chances until it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And then when I have that, whoa, wait a minute moment, it's like, watch out. As clearly people are, as see, but it's just, I don't do that unless I see something that is really, really wrong. And I've learned that I can be a really, really nice person and never say anything negative about people or never call things into question. And yet people still don't like me, or have, certain things to say. And so it's like you can't win any way you look at it. And so you might as well just speak the truth. If it, hurts other people's feelings, then, Yeah,
it's sad that much of the UFO culture is an old boy culture, good old boy culture. And that's changed, I think. And we see more people like you in the field, and people like Jeremy Corbell, who I think does a great job. And it's less about just the UFO experience. It's become more inclusive of different ideas that are tangent to the UFO experience.
It's definitely interesting to see the transition of the old guard to the new. And
right.
I definitely have some things that we're going to take a break so you can get a beverage and take a minute to stretch your legs and things. But when we get back, I want to kind of, talk a little bit more about that, the changing of the guard and some of the new ideas, or maybe old ideas that we're just seeing repackaged that are being brought into the community now. And so I'm really, really looking forward to this. And I want to just tell everybody out there, you can go to Carlo W. Petrick at wixsite.com. And is that the right email? Because that's what I'm looking at for your
yes,
address.
that is. It's sort of a beta site. I'm still working on it. But, I'd love people to come check it out. There's some great photos there, some interesting stories about places I've been and people I've met.
I would definitely recommend it. It's beautiful just to see your photography and everything that you've done. It's really, really cool. So definitely all of my listeners out there, check it out. We are going to take a break. You can go to UFOclassified.com to show your support and help keep UFO Classified on the air and help the archiving process move along. And I really appreciate your love and support, all of you. We are going to take a 2-minute break, and then we will be back. Okay, welcome back to UFO Classified. It's a fabulous Friday night. I get to get into chat, hang with my friends. I love the fact that people that listen to UFO Classified, I feel I know they are incredibly intelligent, thoughtful. We want answers. We want to be told the truth. And there, as you know from every show that I do, there's a lot to weed through and a lot of areas where we could be led down certain paths that aren't necessarily in our best interests. And I know that my guest this evening is somebody that knows all about that. I am back with Carlo, and Carlo, I want to talk a little bit. I mentioned before break that we were going to go into the old guard and the transition with the new guard. But I want to ask you, have you seen things in the field where people are led down a path that you would worry might almost kind of be bordering on cult-like?
Well, I think yes. And I think it is more a cult of personality than believing in, like a religion kind of thing. There are certain speakers, and I don't want to offend anyone by using their names, but there are certain speakers that, as I said before, almost have a cadre that follows them around, that thinks the information that they present is infallible, and they just totally believe. And I think that's wrong. We should be questioning everything and not necessarily totally believing somebody, even if we, trust some of what they're saying.
I agree too, and I think people should be, in an ideal world, humble enough that if somebody says, hey, do you maybe think that this is, wrong, that somebody could say, okay, yeah, you're right, I agree, and then kind of move forward. And I think not enough people, in this subject who are speaking publicly ever do that. And in fact, I've seen a couple of the old timers that I'm thinking of specifically who have just gotten more and more out in left field as they've gotten older. And I don't know whether it's because maybe they're having a mental health issue, or maybe it's, because they just are.
I'll tell you what I think it is. I think they want to get invited back. And if they have the same old information that they've been telling people for, 5 or 10 years, somebody who organizes a conference looks at that person and say, they haven't had anything new to say. Why do I need to give them the stage? There are these other people who nobody's heard of, who have great information. I'll give their hour, or give the old person's hour to the new people because they've got new information. So I think motivation for some of these folks is, I want to get invited back to the conference, but they don't invite me back because I don't have anything new to say, so I have to come up with new stuff.
Some of the new stuff is just kind of ridiculous. It's like, wow, where'd you come up with that one? It's just, I'm sometimes just flabbergasted, especially when I watch some of the, or listen to some of the shows or watch the YouTube videos and things of people, just promoting stuff that is just off the rocker. It's not even, and yet people are just like, oh, I love this. This is, oh, did you, hear about that little gray fellow that, is over here talking to who, blah, blah, blah. And then, just stuff. And it's like, oh, hellfire and damnation. I need to bathe in holy water. So.
Yeah. And a lot of these folks have their niche, like, his name just escaped me. The alien hunter.
Daryl Sims.
Daryl Sims, yeah. He's got his persona with his cowboy hat and his outfits and his demeanor, and his thing is, I'm a badass alien hunter. And the first time I saw him was at the first conference I went to, and I talked to him sitting at his table in the vendor room, and he scared the hell out of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was in that, I was in that state of awe myself attending the first conference. I was seeing all these people who were telling all these fantastic stories, and I'm thinking, yeah. Oh, I hope I don't get abducted. But and then I started filtering things, and I became much more critical and evaluative in my listening.
Which is, yeah, I mean, some people go through that process and some don't. So I don't know about that. But yeah, it is interesting to look back on things now. And I have to ask you, what are your feelings on abductions?
I think that's a great question. And it's part of a bigger question that I have. And that is, why is Earth so important? That if you believe the literature and what people are saying, that extraterrestrials have been coming to Earth since prehistoric times, or at least biblical times, and doing it repeatedly, night after night. And it's not just, one species. It is Greys, it's Nordics, it's Pleiadians, it's reptilians and reticulans, and they are all like drawn like a magnet to the Earth. What is so important about the Earth? So to move on from there, if you believe all of the stories of abduction, you have to believe that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people have been, over the course of the last, 100 or 200 years, abducted. What for? If these are truly species with higher intellects and intelligence, why do they need to collect or keep collecting the same specimens over and over and over and over again? So
that's a good point. Why would they? And why do they have 2 arms and 2 eyes and 2 legs and
yes,
and one of my favorite things that I think is so fascinating are the Tall Nordics.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's been interesting because I've been really looking into the history, not only of the subject, but the history of the people involved in promoting certain messages, and looking at their political leanings, and looking at the fact that you have a great place to conduct little psychological experiments. Let's get in here and seed ideas and create people who are believing in things. And because as you've mentioned, a lot of people in this community will believe a lot that is presented without critical thinking. And then, to me, that would make such a great testing bed for ideas to see where they go and to sway people in a way that isn't necessarily a good thing. And I go to the QAnon thing, and I see how that has really kind of run amok in the UFO field, and people who are we're supposed to be really, great health and wellness. It's wonderful. I think that's important. There are all these, we want to be open-minded, and we want to get in touch with our, our spirit guides, and do all of these things. I think most of us who got into this have a natural curiosity. But then when that kind of thing, that empowerment to better yourself is used as a way to hitch somebody, and then pull you down a path where, oh, wait a minute, now you're going to go to the Capitol and storm it, and so it's such a, to me, that's been something to look at and to step back and really understand, how this subject can be used as a way to manipulate people.
Right. And it also calls into the question any previous research that some of those individuals may have done and been published or, presented. If they're now buying into these kind of conspiracy theories about some of the stuff going on politically, I think that throws what they may have told us about some of the things that they presented about UFOs into question as well. If somebody is so willing to believe that, the election was stolen, or there was massive fraud, or, votes were brought in from Venezuela or something like that, and then tell you to believe something that they wrote earlier, it makes it a little bit more difficult for me.
I mean, I agree, and I think most people should feel that way, because it, I've watched in horror, as people who have I say fairly large audience, but it's the UFO world, so maybe there's an audience of two people. I'm just kidding, but they're talking about and promoting some of these things that are really, they're dangerous. It's not only dangerous to our democracy, it is dangerous to people's psyches, and it ruins relationships with families. And it just is something that I don't understand, why people who are in authority positions in this subject don't kind of stand up and say, well, wait a minute, we should, if we want to, we're looking at UFOs, let's concentrate on that, people, and get some good information out to the public about that, and not, put into play your political leanings and religious leanings. And it's interesting. But do you think that this has been an undercurrent for this topic since its inception?
I think it has. I think that there's a certain kind of people that have always been attracted to this topic, and they're people who are more inclined to believe in conspiracy theories, and more willing just to believe because it fits their worldview. And they don't, in many cases, look critically at what they see. But we've talked about disclosure for ages, and how the government is concealing UFO information and covering things up, and how there's these vast conspiracies, even to the point where governments have made deals with extraterrestrials in order to allow them to abduct people. In return, they're going to give us technological advanced information and things like that. But typically conspiracies will fall apart from the weight of them. They have so many moving parts that have to be constantly kept moving, and you have to have everybody agree not to say a word. And as you know, it's very difficult for humans to keep their mouths closed. At some point, they're going to say something.
So what are you're right. And what are your thoughts on disclosure?
Well, first of all, I question, what is there to disclose? Does the government really know? Have they captured, alien craft at Roswell or Kingman or wherever? I think people will be very disappointed when the government finally says, well, this is what we know about UFOs. Because I think what they're going to say is, something's happening. We don't know what it is. We think it might be extraterrestrial nature, but we're only speculating on that. We haven't captured anything. We haven't back-engineered UFO technology at Area 51. But just to be up and open about it, here's some of the footage from our cameras on shooting the Tic Tac and things like that. So I think people are going to be very disappointed. And the other thing with disclosure is we are so inclined to believe that the government is covering things up that why should we believe what they tell us now?
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there are so many people who have their own agendas, and if the government doesn't disclose what they believe, they're going to say, "Oh, it's more cover-up." I know that there are reptilian bases on the backside of the moon. The government knows it, but they're not telling us. They're making up some crazy story like they did with Project Mogul and weather balloons and all that stuff.
And that's exactly it. I mean, I think even, what is disclosure? And, why would we expect, why do we need to look to our government, to give us information about that? And I mean, we also have to understand too that it's like they're things that are national security, that have national security implications. And so, if there is a level of obfuscation, if we're not getting told the whole story on things, or being told or fed information that is kind of steering us away from the truth, there might be a reason for that.
Right.
And so people don't quite get that, I think.
And I think that a lot of it's intentional, because the UFO phenomena is a great smokescreen for earthly technology to be tested and flown and easily dismissed as a UFO, and those crazy people with the tinfoil hats and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and it's really interesting because there are some. I always go back to the Androphil files because I'm in heaven and, I'm bringing home different files. Oh my gosh, just every day. I love it. But there are some old cases that she had, and at the time they were suspecting this might be a UFO, and some of the photos of like, what is that? I mean, it's clearly in the photo, but now that I'm looking back at it and some of the technology that we see, that we know about, today, it's like, okay. Got it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, what are your feelings on the Tic Tac?
Well, I think it's something, again, that was photographed that is unexplained. And it could be technology that we don't know is out there, that is human technology. It could be something from space, but there just isn't enough information there. Yeah,
it is interesting to see how things have been progressing with some of these sightings, and there is an historic precedent for sightings in this particular area, which, as we know, there are a lot of testing and military operations taking place and stuff, and so it's quite interesting to look back again at the history of things like that. I love it.
I can say one good thing that came of that was Kevin Day coming onto the UFO scene. He's a great guy, very, very intelligent and very reasonable. He was part of the team that saw that, and now he's doing a lot of research on his own. But if you talk to Kevin, he will tell you, I don't know what it was. It could have been that. It could have been something else. But we need more information. And those are the kind of people that we need in the field. People who are not willing to just jump to a conclusion because it fits their worldview.
Right.
It fits their belief system. Oh, yeah, they're UFOs. They're extraterrestrial. So everything is viewed through that lens.
And Kevin, I've never actually spoken with Kevin, but he's always struck me as a very kind person. And I think from looking at it from the, my vantage point, it seemed like he all of a sudden, all of this attention and different things kind of took him off guard a little bit. And that was, it's always a difficult thing, I think, when you're thrust into this spotlight and there's so many people that do have agendas that are trying to latch onto you and things. And, you learn a lot.
But I got to say, I think he took it very well. He's a down-to-earth guy. If you talk to him, you believe him and you believe what he tells you, because he's just got that kind of demeanor. He's got that kind of personality.
Well, I would love to talk to him someday, because I definitely, that's the impression I have of him as well. And that is, right. We do need more people like that who are willing to say, hey, I'm not sure, but here's my story.
Mm-hmm. and people who are willing to change their minds when presented evidence opposite of what they think. Yes.
Yeah. That is a good thing, because this is a subject that, none of us really truly know. We don't know what we're dealing with. There's so many aspects of this, and a lot of us are we aren't trained. We don't have PhDs. We're not, educated in certain ways, and I think that it's, we should have that humility to say, yep, okay, this is going to change, and that's the way it rolls. But
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the old guard, and then, the transition to the younger generation. When you look at the old guard of ufologists, who were some of the people that really stood out to you?
Well, I already mentioned Stanton. Dr. Roger Lear, who's a great guy. Travis, Linda Moulton Howe, Belay, Bud Hopkins, great guy. Leo Sprinkle. A lot of these people were presenting very interesting things for a long time. John Mack, great guy.
Do you think that, if is there anybody on that list? I won't make you name names or anything, but anybody on that list that you've seen that is, that you looked at back then and said, yeah, and then now you're like, oh dear.
I would say most of them, no.
Okay. Most of them.
I think so. and I will only say that some of the material that subsequently was produced was a bit more made for TV, for sensationalism, and really didn't represent the true views of some of those people. But they did them because you have to have something interesting if you want to be on UFO Hunters or some of those shows.
Right. Yeah, it is interesting. I think sometimes, like when I'm thinking of the old guard, because I've kind of immersed myself into the behind the scenes world of things. Like I think of, and hopefully Barry won't hurt me for saying this, but like the Barry Greenwoods, who's never, I don't think he's ever done a lecture, which to me that would be, if I was going to a conference, if I held a conference, I would have Jan Aldrich, Barry Greenwood, some of these people that you don't, if you're in the show of ufology, you get
right.
the Linda Moulton Howe and Richard Dolan, that kind of crowd. And then if you're in a different world over here, but this world over here is so rich with people who understand the history and the games and the, just different things that have taken place. And I just am so, I just dig it so much. And that's why I have them on my show constantly. But, have you noticed that there is an attempt by maybe a younger guard, this new group of people that is coming into the subject, to change the way things are being presented? And let me just kind of give you my thought on that. So there is a real push to sweep up all the UFO data. And luckily that is going to some good archivists that are scanning and preserving the history, but a lot of this information can, and I believe is going to disappear. So this new group of people that is coming onto the scene can rewrite the history, and therefore younger people getting into it won't have the kind of won't have that foundation that they really need to progress in the subject.
I think there's some of that going on, and I think again it has to do with the popularity of the subject on a broader basis in society. You know, there never have there been so many programs dedicated to UFOs on cable channels, ancient aliens and UFO hunters and fact or faked or what's the new one? The best evidence, or lots of popular things. And in order for the information to be entertaining, it has to be spun a certain way. It has to be, dramatized and a lot of times fictionalized and made to look good on television. But I think there are some people who are doing a great job. John Greenwald, for example, with the Black Vault, is constantly posting new information. He got into trouble for posting all of the Blue Book files because apparently somebody had gotten copyright on them. And
it was Fold 3, which is, I believe, Ancestry is involved with Fold 3, which I find very fascinating.
Yeah.
Utah connection.
Mm-hmm. And then another guy that I really admire is, oh my God. I'm just drawing a blank on his name, and I was just thinking of him. He did The Phenomena, just came out recently.
James Fox.
Yeah, James Fox, yeah. Yeah, he's done a lot of great work. And I've had an opportunity to talk to him several times. And to hear what he's doing, the research he's putting into what he does is just fantastic. He's trying to track down people who showed an obscure movie in a movie theater, 50 years ago, to get some information about somebody that was in that movie that he thought was relevant to what he was doing now. He's just his film The Phenomena is a great example of how to do a good documentary. And I think the same with Jeremy Corbell. Some of the stuff that he's doing is excellent. But again, it's all from their perspectives, their point of view, and it fits what they believe. So you have to always consider that. What is the source for this material? And how am I supposed to react to it?
Well, and I just have to say, because I know that, I'm sure my listeners are, probably going, with the certain one of those people that you mentioned. But I will say that I do really I like James Fox and have a lot of respect for him. And I've had many, great conversations with him. And he's just so gung-ho and energetic about this and puts so much passion into it and things. And I think he's seems very, very genuine. And I like that about James.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, not so much. Sorry, I can't help myself. I can't help myself. I
realize he's got people who think very highly of him, and others who couldn't believe he was given Researcher of the Year award a couple of years ago.
Oh, God, I didn't know that. That's, no. Another reason to bathe in holy water. Oh well. No, you have to laugh. Like
but
sometimes, go ahead.
But I think we need to look at all of these things and understand what we're looking at. And even if we don't necessarily agree with what they're doing, at least look at what they're saying and see, is there something in there that really I can take away from it that improves my understanding of this topic? Or the other side of it is, this is just so misrepresentative of what I believe that it reinforces what I believe.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. And like I mentioned in the first part of the show, it takes me a lot for me not to give somebody a second, third, fourth, fifth chance. Mm-hmm. and things. And, I'm always, I have supported people early on that now I'm looking back at like, oh, but that was a learning process and things. And so when I come out strongly about people or, ideas and stuff, it's because there's a reason for that. And it's not just a petty, you know what I mean? There's a real reason for that, but it is interesting to just kind of just see. And I've honestly, I've been threatening this forever. I would love to do like a sock puppet show on ufology. I mean, clearly, like I've outed. Oh my God! I actually, there was a period in time when I was like, talking to Nick and Greg, and I was trying to make sock puppets of them and various other people, and I showed my daughter one of them, and I think I really scarred her for life. And she's just like, "What is that?" Because that's just quite unnatural. But I mean, it would be, I could just see it because sometimes there's some things in the subject and in the field and, the petty goings ons and some of the preposterous things that people say. It's like the only way you could like really, just sock puppets would be good. Can you imagine? I promise I won't make one of you, but you wouldn't recognize it anyway.
That would be so much fun.
Oh my gosh. But it's like sometimes you just have to have levity, in this, because it's like, oh my Lord, right. We can't take ourselves so seriously that, we wouldn't want a little sock puppet. I don't know. There's my tangent. You never know. Just look to YouTube. You could be seeing something coming up pretty quick. It's not me though. Oh, I don't know. It's just funny. I just needed to laugh. So thank you for humoring me on that one. But
we all need to laugh.
We do, especially in, when we're living the zombie apocalypse and things like that. But I want to go back to, because just saying zombie apocalypse again goes back to, for me, some of the dangerous things I've seen in this field with regard to believing information that is being put out that is, like the, don't wear a mask thing. Your natural immune system can work perfectly and they're lying to you. And when you breathe in these, the masks, you're getting, whatever, poisoning and blah, blah, blah. And or don't take the vaccine or different things, and it's like, I mean, for me, again, that's a pretty dangerous road to go down, especially when you're dealing with human lives. So
I agree absolutely, and as I stated, earlier, I think this field attracts those kind of people, people who have a certain worldview that everything is being covered up, that anything the government does is going to be subject to question. We can't believe the media. We can't believe the government. We can't believe, the clergy. We can't believe scientists. But we have to believe something that somebody posts on YouTube that says the Earth is flat and that we've never been to the moon, and all that crazy stuff. And I say, I see some of these things on some of the pages that my friends post. Sometimes real friends, sometimes just Facebook friends. But I say, give me evidence of that. And they post a video of somebody saying something on YouTube. And, just because it's on YouTube, that makes it true. Well,
that sums up the state of the human race at the present time. Yeah, mm-hmm.
It's craziness in some senses that people cannot understand simple science. I think I've lost some Facebook friends over advocating people wear masks and saying that's nonsense when you post that if you wear a mask, you're breathing in your own carbon dioxide and you're going to, lose mental capacity. And I say, Okay.
Too late for that.
So explain to me how a doctor can be in an operating room performing an operation for 10 hours wearing a mask without having diminished mental capacity. Oh, and then the mask prevents the disease or the water particles, water vapor from going as far because it's dispersed through the fabric of the material. And if you want to prove it, just take a water hose and spray it through a screen and see how far that water goes compared to just spraying it straight out of the hose.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly it. I mean, it's sad that something like that has become so, politically motivated, and how people are just, I mean, this is just common sense. This is, realize that there is propaganda that is being put out there for certain reasons, and you better, weed through it because people are dying. They are ending up, we have a friend in the UFO community who is still in ICU with COVID and things. And it's just like, this has taken so many lives, and we have an opportunity now with some of the different vaccines to be monitored and tracked by Bill Gates for the rest of our lives. And I think we should jump on that opportunity.
Yeah.
Yep, I know. I always have to say that because it just cracks me up. It's like one of those things. It's like we oh great, we've got a little microchip in us. Well, guess what? What kind of cell phone are you talking on? What computer is listening to you? What's your Nest on the wall, doing? I mean, I'm thinking we don't need a microchip. It's all around us. So,
Right. Well, soon you'll be able to boot up a dream from Windows,
Exactly. I mean, I don't know. What are you... I don't know. I mean, what... You've mentioned that you've lost friends, and I'm sure, I've lost friends, which, I mean... Oh, well, that's a bummer. But, I mean, it's like I don't know. At what point do we have... as people in a subject that we care very passionately about, at what point do we have a moral obligation to try to make the field better, or do we? Because this is always the way it's been.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think we always have to do what we can to try to make the field better by calling out people who are presenting misinformation and providing actual information that contradicts them, that can be scientifically proven. One of the biggest problems I have with the whole field is the lack of science that goes into most of what people talk about. We make a huge leap of faith that the laws of physics can easily be broken, that in order for somebody to get here from a distant star or other galaxy, it takes light years, and our technology can't do it, but also our theories can't do it. The idea that you can travel faster than the speed of light is just an idea. Einstein says it's not possible that in order to get even close to the speed of light, it takes an infinite amount of energy. So where's all that energy going to come from? It's going to totally bleed every bit of energy out of the universe in order to even get to the speed of light. So we have to get over that first. And, people talk about black holes and space-time continuums and, curved space, and how that can be a way that we can get past the speed of light. But then, nobody can figure out quite how to do that. And it's all theoretical at this point. And we have to assume that if there are extraterrestrials out there, that they figured it out somehow, or they've rewritten the laws of physics so that they can go, at warp speed and faster than the speed of light, or they figured out how to go back or go forward in time. And again, it comes back to, where is the evidence? Where's the proof of any of this? It's all speculation as far as I can see.
Agree. I mean, yes, it is speculation, and I just, people should want to try to get, use the scientific method and try to look at this from a rational standpoint. And I know that some of these things, I mean, I've had experiences that I have talked about that I still can't explain.
Right.
But, do I necessarily believe, the extraterrestrial hypothesis? I really don't right at this point in my life. I mean, of course, there's so much out there, and we would be foolish to think that we are where it begins and ends. But
right.
It's like where we have to look for proof, and we have to make sure that we understand that what we've been fed is potentially a smokescreen to cover other things, or to lead us down dark paths. And I think, like with the religious aspect of things, we've seen a lot of people, you mentioned the Nephilim and I mean, all of these things and the religious aspect of things. And when you have gone to some of the conferences and things, I mean, what are your thoughts on what you're seeing with that? Is that becoming more of a thing? Or is that always been there?
Well, it's always been there. I remember some of that stuff from some of the earliest conference I went to. And at one point, I told a friend, if some of these lectures, if you listen to them and you replace the word UFO with Jesus, it makes as much sense. Because they become belief systems in some regards. That, the UFOs are here to save us. They're here to help us, to give us advanced technology so that we can become better people, that we can have peace. And, a lot of that, I think, is just transference from religious beliefs to UFOs.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is interesting, too, to see how many people are really going down, the road of, the apocalypse is coming, and, the benevolent space brothers are here to save us and stuff. And I mean, when I look back, obviously looking back at the literature, it always has been there. But it just seems like now we're seeing a little uptick in that again.
Right. And yes, we've seen that from the beginning with the people who were out in the desert at Giant Rock, waiting for the space brother to come and provide us with great information and show us the way to intergalactic harmony. And then we still see echoes of that today. And it seems to be broken down into a couple of camps. One is, extraterrestrials are here because they are benevolent. They want to help us. They want to protect us from ourselves so we don't blow ourselves up in a nuclear war. Or they're here to eat us.
Well, I'm not sure which one I would be rooting for today.
Hey, and that last one, I've heard some people seriously tell me that the reason that the extraterrestrials are here is because they need food, and they're going to be like in Tom Cruise's version of War of the Worlds, eating us.
Well, I mean, isn't that to some degree, and I don't know much about Scientology, but isn't that kind of along those lines?
I don't know enough about Scientology either.
That's probably okay. Maybe we should ask
Although
Cal
I can tell
Putoff.
you although I can tell you they do have a beautiful campus in downtown Clearwater.
Do they?
But it's very strange to drive past and see all of these people in their white shirts and ties walking around in 90-degree weather.
That sounds like driving by the temple.
Yes.
Salt Lake. Yeah. Well, it's definitely fascinating. And I want to, ask you about, because this is something that I've, obviously this is very prevalent in our minds today, given the current news and situation in our country. But I want to ask you your thoughts about racism in the field of ufology. To me, it has become very alarming to look at it and to see some of the statements that are made by public people in the field, and the lack of other statements by people who should be calling this behavior out. And it's so, just elaborate on that.
Well, I know some of the issues that you're talking about, and some of the people who have made those kind of statements, and I think it's reprehensible. As a field, though, I think we see very, very few people of color, minorities, who are on the circuit making presentations. It's a lot of old white guys and, some younger white guys and girls. So I don't know. There are a lot of there are overtly racist people in this field, but I don't know that it's a field that really attracts a lot of interest from non-white people. I say that looking at the audiences that are attending the conferences that I've been going to for 25 years. There are very, very few people of color, with the exception of some indigenous peoples, have similar beliefs to some of what some of the UFO people are saying.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, there, and I think there could be several issues at play here. But I did have one of my friends, and he was on the show a few months ago, and he is black, and he was mentioning that he had people sending him death threats and saying, we'd love to see you swinging from a tree and different things like that. And so, unfortunately, there is, it does attract people that hold those conspiracy thoughts, and that have unfortunately gravitated towards that kind of thought, which is just very, very interesting. But I just wanted to get your comments on that. And I mean, you're right. This is a field of old white guys. And, so maybe some of the, if you're looking for love, don't do it in the UFO field. Run. No, I'm kidding. But you know what I mean. It is interesting. And as a woman, I mean, it's been an interesting thing as well to have some of the experiences that I've had, and to see nobody doing the right thing in that regard. And I remember, a couple of the women who are in the field who are older, I'd have conversations about it, and it was kind of their attitude was, oh, we just, we're not going to say anything about it. We're just going to focus on the positive. And I'm like, huh? Mm-hmm. Because that clearly is working really well.
Right. Yeah.
Pretending things aren't happening. Good strategy. And how do we get, intelligent women interested in the subject when they have to deal with some of the things that I've dealt with, or other women who I've had on my show have had to deal with? It just is
right. And I think we need to make the field more open and accepting of people, and less accepting of people who are overt charlatans, just out there presenting information for their own edification.
and I wish there was some sort of, I wish there were standards. I wish that people could sit around at a table and say, okay, this is what, as professionals in this subject, what we will and won't accept. And, I kind of throw things out there. I just did an interview on the Paracast where I was being interviewed, which was fun for a change. But I was just, mentioning the fact that, we go, most of us have jobs, we go to work, and we are expected to behave, ethically and legally, and and follow laws and different things. But yet, when we get into the UFO world, it's like, whatever. Who cares? We're not going to do either of those things, really. And so, why can't we just all come together and be ethical?
Right. And it's kind of like Facebook, where people think that the things that they say have no consequences, that they do things that they would probably never do in their personal life, like call people names or make fun of them or, just treat them poorly. I mean, if I were talking to you, would you say the same thing to my face that you post on your Facebook page? I think there's some of that.
Yes.
People feel the comfort of the group.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, I think you're right. People get away because you can hide behind, you can hide behind anonymity, or you can behind, nobody's ever going to really look you in the eye and say, what?
Yeah. I can't tell you the number of times I've been called stupid, libtard, idiot, from people who don't even know me.
Wow.
But they just disagree with something that I post. So if I post something that they disagree with, I must obviously be stupid. I must be an idiot,
And that is just so, it's so alarming to me that you can't be, I think one of the great things about being a human being and being an adult is you can have rational conversations and not agree with somebody, but learn about their perspective, and that just makes you a better person.
Yes, I agree.
And I don't get where we got to a point in our society where, because if you don't believe in this and you're not doing that, then I have the right to just degrade you and intimidate you and all of that stuff. And that's a really sad part of what's taking place.
And that goes back to what you were talking about with racism and sexism. Fine, you can argue with my political perspective, you can argue with my facts, but don't argue against me saying, you're stupid, you're an idiot. As of my first name, people have called me, or think I'm from Mexico or someplace. And don't disparage people based on who they are, but you can argue and debate what they think and what they say.
Right, and it makes life fun.
Yeah.
Or at least it should, but unfortunately, people, I don't know, people are just in a very different space right now, and having had personal experiences, with that, it's special.
I've got a lot of friends that I vehemently disagree with their views on many things, but we still remain friends, and we can talk civilly, and we don't insult each other, we don't call each other names. So I think we need to be able to talk to each other and stop hiding behind the persona of anything I say on Facebook is fine, or anything I say at a UFO conference is fine. I can call you stupid because you believe in reptilians, or I can call you an idiot because you think that Greys are abducting people. or I can call you stupid because you don't believe that there's a base on the moon or that we've been to Mars for centuries, things like that. Okay, let's just talk about those. Let's talk about the actual data, the facts, the information, without getting into our personalities.
Right. And, we're supposed to be, or a lot of us pretend to be, spiritually enlightened. And, this new way of doing things and, oh, look at me, but yet they're the most racist, bullying, person
Right.
on the planet. And it's like, wait a minute, just start preaching, walking your talk there. I think that's pretty tough talk for me. It's kind of frightening, actually. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and we definitely. I think that the field would be a much better place if we could do some of those things. Just basic common courtesy, civility.
Sure, and I think there's a lot of tribalism that people of certain beliefs cling together, and they don't like people who don't believe the same things that they do, and because of that, they will ostracize them or insult them or defriend them just because they happen to have different ideas.
It's just I don't know. I think diversity. I think learning about other cultures and religions and political views. I think it's interesting, fascinating. But I want to ask you, because time is getting short, and you have been to so many beautiful places. I mean, tell me what is your favorite place that you've been? And I know it's hard because each place probably holds a special meaning for you.
Right. Absolutely. One of the most fascinating places in the world that I've ever been is Tibet. It's in the Himalaya Mountains. I visited the city of Lhasa, and it was unlike any place I had ever been before in my life, primarily because of the Tibetan Buddhists and the pervasiveness of Buddhism in the culture of Tibet and the people. I'd walk down the street. We're going to Barkur Square, which is kind of an open-air market. And as we get closer and closer, we see a haze, and it is smoke that's coming out of all of these large incense burners that are every few feet along the sidewalk. And people are bringing different kinds of wood and herbs and things that they're throwing into the incense burner. And the whole area is just filled with smoke that has this incredibly savory smell, and it gets into your lungs and your eyes. You just wonder why is this going on? But all of the rituals about walking counterclockwise versus clockwise, and you have somebody. Most of these people are going to pilgrimages to see the monasteries and the temples and palaces and things that are in the city, and they're walking with their prayer wheels, and most of them have these small prayer wheels that they hold in one hand, and they twirl, basically, so that the prayers that are on a paper spool inside the reel go into the heavens, and that's the way of sending messages into the ether, I guess. But it's just so very, very completely different than anything you'll see anywhere else on Earth. I'm sure there are other places like India that you would see similar things, but to me, it was just the most amazing place. One of the places that we went was the Sera Monastery, which was a place where Buddhist monks were taught about their religious beliefs. One of the things that is tradition there is the monks debating each other, talking about points of their religion and their belief systems, and seeing if the people who have been taught at the monastery have a high level understanding of the philosophies and the theology of it. That was just fascinating. And then touring Potala Palace, which is the home of the Dalai Lama before he went to India in exile. Just the spirituality of the place was just overwhelming.
Yeah, and as you're sitting here telling these stories, I'm looking at your pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's just the way you capture, a person and the emotion that they're feeling at that time is incredible. And then just, I mean, some of the architecture and
mm-hmm.
I just, and the colorful clothing, and I mean, it just gives me goosebumps. It is so cool. And I love. Gosh, go ahead.
Looking at some of those photos, you see the expressions on people's faces and the deep wrinkles, because they're living at 12,000 feet, where the atmosphere is thinner and they get more radiation from the sun, so their skin is almost a tan leather look, but they have these brilliant, sparkling eyes. You see people on prayer mats, and there's one photo I love of a younger woman with her eyes looking upward and her hands pressed together in prayer.
Yes, that's beautiful. All of them are.
And then
oh man.
And then in contrast, there's another very elderly woman who's walking past these brilliant gold prayer wheels, and you can just imagine what she's thinking about her life and what it's like to live in such a beautiful but relatively desolate place.
Well, I don't know if I will have the opportunity to go there, but maybe I need to now, because this is incredible.
But of course, there's always the other side of it, and you have the spirituality of the Tibetan people and the monasteries and the temples and all of that. The candles constantly burning and the offerings. People are putting money in crevices and walls of these holy places that supports the monks who live there. But in contrast, you have the Chinese soldiers marching down the streets in full military gear with rifles. You've got Chinese soldiers on rooftops watching, people telling you, don't point your camera that way, or the soldiers will confiscate it. So there's that contrast.
Well, I thank you for sharing that, and I'll have to have you back on and we can talk more about your travels, because I think all of us right now are so jonesing to travel. So we've just done it vicariously through you tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it's just been a delight to talk to you. I knew it would be, and it's been far too long since I've seen you, so I hope to see you at a conference soon. And so the next conference that you will be at, tell us again.
Yes, it's the Laughlin UFO Mega Conference, and it's in Laughlin, Arizona. I'm sorry, Laughlin, Nevada. Arizona's across the river, and I don't remember the exact dates, but it's in mid to late June at the Aquarius Hotel. It's going to be a week-long conference. It's hosted by Bob Brown, who was the founder or co-founder of the original UFO Congress way back in the early 90s. And he's got a great lineup of people including Johnny Enoch, and Richard Dolan's going to be there, and a bunch of other folks. So I'll be there, and maybe we'll see you.
Yes, you never know. I would love to see people's faces. No, I'm just kidding. I'd actually love to see some of my friends that I know are going to be there, like you, and things. That would be fun if I can get out of my bubble. I feel like just so. Telling you, it's been a long year, but it's spring now and life is good, and so I just thank you so much for being a positive influence in the world, and thanks for all you do to make everybody else look good too. And so,
well, I truly appreciate it, but it starts with you.
Well, it's fun, and I hope I have, like I said, next time I see you and I'm on stage, maybe not so much with the PowerPoint, unless you give me a crash course before, but we'll we'll see how that goes. But thank you very much, and please be safe and take care of yourself. And we will talk soon. And I want to just say, again, you can go to just look at Carlo's beautiful work, Carlo W. Petrick, Petrick .wixsite.com. So you can go there and check that out. And thank you very much, kind sir. And I want to thank all of my people that get in here and support the show. And I'm noticing that I'm getting more people that are becoming Patreons. And that is great, because that means I could do more archiving and get information out to you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys all stay safe. And I'm not going to tell you who's going to be on next week, because you know me, I kind of like to live on the edge. It'll be a surprise. But take care, and I will see you guys next week.
So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course, the tinfoil hat guy's gonna see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
We want to put it to use to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is, and you just kind of adapt and overcome.
What are you going to do with all this? You can't even take care of your own files and get them put into the current system, but yet you want to go collect other people's things. So what are you going to do with it? Who are you giving all this to?
It just really struck me about how the common thread seemed to be deception, but deception of a human nature. So that's what I started thinking, who would these folks be? I mean, then I started thinking about the intelligence agencies, what role they could play, and what would be their motivations for getting involved in ufology.
I'm not saying that because the gimbal is not a rotating flying saucer, that means that all the UFOs are false. Not at all. All I'm doing is I'm looking at this one case, these individual cases, and seeing if there's an explanation for those. So try to, if I could ask people out there listening, don't think that I'm trying to attack your entire beliefs about these things.
Nice.